FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
One of the examples that I like to use is the case of biofuels. Now, I know we're talking about energy, but of course there's a relationship between energy and food. And if you think about it, biofuels was the win-win. We were going to take what we had in abundance, overabundance, grain, and turn it into fuel, and we were going to solve our energy problems and actually give farmers better prices. So we decided, well, we'll subsidize. We'll give a tax credit of 51 cents for every gallon of biofuels that we make. And since it takes, you can get about 3 gallons of biofuel or ethanol from a bushel of corn, what that meant was that these biofuel refiners had about $1.50 extra that they could bid for the price of corn above what a kind of a normal buyer could. And they did bid it. They bid the price up. And here's what happened. Farmers saw that they could get more selling their corn to biofuels refiners, so they did. And not only that, they began growing more corn and less of other crops because corn's paying the most, why not? So if you were going to plant soybeans next year, maybe you'd plant corn. Cotton, no, you'd plant corn. Wheat, you'd plant corn. Even hay, you would plant corn if you could get away with it. And so what happened was the land for these other crops shrunk, and so even as the price of corn went up, so did the price for these other commodities. So if you could have viewed the United States from one of those satellites and watched time motion photography, you would have seen the corn belt sort of spreading out. North and south and east and west, becoming larger at the expense of all these other crops. So you can see how ethanol was linked to the food system, even though we didn't really or many of us didn't really understand how that was going to happen. And there's another way that's linked too. If you're a farmer who has been feeding corn to your pigs and suddenly corn is too expensive, you'll feed another grain. You'll feed oats, you'll feed millet, whatever you can find, which means the demand for those grains will go up and so will the price. So what we did is we set in motion this huge ripple effect through the economy, driving up the price. And I don't know how many people get up the first thing in the morning and you look at corn prices. Okay, I do. And 3 years ago, corn was trading at $1.85 a bushel. And today it's about $7.50 a bushel. Now, that's a lot of money. I mean, that's a big difference. And if you're a corn farmer, you are paying more for fertilizer and more for other inputs, but you're making some money for the first time in probably 20 years. The downside, of course, is for people that depend on that corn. Now, in this country, we could do with more expensive food. We really could. Most of us can't afford to pay more for our food. The average household spends about, actually, 9 cents of every household dollar on food. And this is down from about 50 cents of every household dollar at the turn of the last century. So we've come a long way. The story is quite different when you go to somewhere like Mexico or Kenya, or any dozens of other poorer countries where the fraction of the household expenditure that's put toward food is 60 or 70 or 80%. So when you see grain prices triple and quadruple, you see people without any hope. I mean, they simply have lost the main staple of their diet. It's gone. And what's particularly ironic is that many of these countries, we and other big exporters have spent the last 20, 30 years telling you don't need to grow the food yourselves. All right? In fact, it's kind of stupid to have tens of millions of small, inefficient farmers growing food when in the United States and in Europe, we grow it much more efficiently on these huge farms. We can pretty much guarantee you an endless supply of low-cost grain in exchange for you opening up your borders and letting it in. And it's a great deal until recently. So now we've quadrupled the price of corn, and we're still sort of talking about free trade, but in a much lower voice. So what's the lesson from the biofuels debacle? I mean, there's a lot of lessons. Food and fuel don't mix. But to me, one of the key lessons is, as a species, we still don't approach these problems as if they were connected. We still want to see food as its sort of discrete, independent sector that we can mess with without worrying about any effects outside it. And we'd like to see energy in the same way. And we don't like the idea that tinkering with one messes with the other. It bugs us, because what it means is that we might not know what we're doing. And in fact, that's really the takeaway here, that we've spent the last couple hundred years imagining that we could break the world up into little pieces and make each of those pieces more efficient. We could take a farm where the guy used to raise livestock and grain and vegetables, and we could split up all those functions, and we could learn to do it much more efficiently, raise pigs on these huge farms with gigantic poop lagoons, and have gigantic corn farms, and raise our vegetables in equally large farms, and that the system wouldn't mind, that it was okay to do that. And what we're learning is that you can't break the system apart without having substantial problems.